Thank you, Jack. Jack and Natalie are such good friends. This is a wonderful award, and I feel very honored to be here along with David and Ed and Michael. It's so special because it's called the Peter Lougheed Public Policy Award. So for two reasons. First of all, of course, because of Peter Lougheed, but also public policy. And so coming last, and a lot of very important and serious things have been said tonight, I'm going to be lighthearted and talk to you about what it's like making public policy in the trenches. Because I see this, thank heavens for the Public Policy Forum, but I see this as two separate words. So you've got policy, which can come out of the academic field, it can come out of civil service, it can come from politicians, it can be a wonderful principled idea, but it's still just policy. It doesn't become public policy until you actually have it sort of pressed and changed and altered and adjusted and affected by what in fact is possible because it's legal or meets regulations or meets the political reality. And so I think that's why I love public policy so much. It's a rough game, and it's not easy to do. And anyone here who's in politics or is in public service, you know what it takes to get a policy. I would suggest that some of the people who are here and perhaps in business sometimes look at politicians and say, well, it's so obvious. Like, why don't they just do it? But there are always all of these pieces that you're trying to fit together. And so coming last, David Mitchell said, you got to, be exciting, Carole. You got to talk about something big. So I thought I'd talk about accounting. You think I'm kidding. Peter Lougheed was one of Canada's just finest premiers. And he did, unfortunately, give me some grief when I was Minister of Finance. We in British Columbia followed a set of accounting principles called GAAP. So it's Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. When we were doing very well and our surpluses were running $3 and $4 billion a year, reporters would come to me and say, why don't you do what Peter Lougheed does? He set up the Heritage Fund. Great idea, great question, a really lousy answer. The answer was BC is the only province in Canada that followed GAAP. Those accounting principles said that at the end of the year, March 31st, all of the dollars that you had either had to be spent or assigned, or else what was left went to pay down the debt. You were not allowed to carry forward dollars. And so what was a wonderful public policy in Alberta was an impossible policy in British Columbia. So there was an example of a great idea that you just couldn't make work because of the rules. But our old friend Gap turned around and helped me on another policy area where I was trying to accomplish something. You know what it's like when you're first minister? There are lots of ministers here. You get all the briefing books. Well, tucked in the middle of one of the briefing books, it said, oh, by the way, in British Columbia, on March 31st, our year end, 90% of the civil servants and people involved with public service in British Columbia, all of their contracts are expiring. British Columbia is not known for its harmonious labor relationships. The notion of 300,000 individuals, doctors, nurses, engineers, HEU, BCGEU, CUPE, all having contracts go away on March 31st was not a good idea. And they said, by the way, it's your ministry. So with this challenge sitting in my head, along comes Hurricane Katrina. Now in politics, if you've got to be one thing, you've got to be flexible. Katrina came along, hit all of the refineries in the Gulf. Natural gas prices went through the roof. And in just a couple of weeks, we had come into our revenue stream over $1 billion in unexpected, unplanned, one-time revenues. So those of you who know me well know I'm a crazy football fan, and I know all about signing bonuses. So I was thinking, perhaps we could use this $1 billion and share it with all of the workers that we're trying to do contracts with. And what caused a failure with the Heritage Fund allowed me to say to all of these unions, the money disappears on March 31st. This was no joke. It disappears. And so the notion was that every worker in this province would get about $4,000 whose contracts were coming up if their union signed a new contract before the old one expired. Now, this was unorthodox. I would say to you that there probably wasn't a negotiator on our team who thought it was a good idea, but it was one way of trying to take public policy outside the box. And instead of doing things the way it always had been done, like some of the negotiators said, well, just give it to me in my back pocket at the right time, I'll put it on the table, everything will be swell. But this was a way of actually trying to share with all of our people and say, thank you for the work you do. That was the other thing. I said, when we sit down at these tables, the first thing you do is you say, thank you for the work you do. This would not be the province that we are without all of your contributions. And again, some of the negotiators said, well, that's not how it works. You don't do that. You don't sit down and say, like, thank you. We did. And we had over 60 tables going. And on March 31st, it had to be done by midnight. At 11:40 p.m., we signed the last contract. Every single contract in the province got signed before they expired. And that, again, was because we were able to take a rule and apply it to a situation and think a little bit differently about public policy. So I love public policy. I think it is exceptionally difficult. It's so important, and yet it is something that I think those of us, Chuck Strahl and I were just talking earlier, those of us who have been involved, that's what we miss when we leave politics. There are some things I don't miss. I do miss the public policy. So thank you for this award. It means a lot to me. It's trying to take a perfect principle, a good idea, and make it work in an imperfect world. It's a wonderful challenge. Thank you.